Good morning, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Box, and excited to have you with us as we get ready for the big showdown on Saturday between Georgia and Notre Dame. We'll bring on a special guest from South Bend, Indiana today to give us an extra look at the Irish. Jeff Sintel will be here as always on Tuesday for his Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Deep list of five-star visitors, some of them on official visits, coming into UGA this weekend. Jeff will tell us all about that. Though, off the top of the program, will begin this way. I think the chess match between Brian Kelly and Kirby Smart on Saturday, I think it may involve an interesting facet, at least on the part of Smart, maybe a part of this game plan that might have been overlooked a little bit by some Georgia fans. We'll talk about that to begin the show. As I said before, it's great to have you with us. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Box. Begins right now.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I said as a part of yesterday's show, I expect Georgia to win the game on Saturday, and I don't really expect it to be close. That does not mean, however, that I don't think that Notre Dame brings a lot to the table and potentially a lot worthy of respect, something you have to pay pretty close attention to. For instance, when you look at the situation involving the Fighting Irish quarterback, for instance, Ian Book is a name that's going to certainly be paid close attention to. When you listen to Georgia coaches and players talk this week, one of the things they're going to talk about is the fact that the game plan for Saturday begins and ends with knowing where Book is at all times, knowing what he's doing, knowing what he's bringing to the table. That is obviously a very important part of this game plan for Georgia, paying very close attention to all of that. He is going to certainly be important for the Bulldogs on Saturday. Book has been a guy that has shown an ability to be able to do it with his arms and his legs, and that's clearly something to be paying close attention to on Saturday. In fact, Kirby Smart himself, when he did his press conference on Monday to look ahead to what's going to happen on Saturday, he talked about Ian Book and the specific challenge that this quarterback dual threat with his arms and his legs brings to the table. Here's what Kirby said about Book going back to yesterday.
As far as Ian Book, he's very talented. The guy's fast, explosive. He's a dual threat guy that doesn't have to be a dual threat guy. I mean, he's exactly what is hard to prepare for, because when a play breaks down, a lot of times you think it's a coach or a defensive coach, you got it right. You finally got it right, and then all of a sudden he gets a 10-yard gain on a play that you got it right on. You know, you had him for a sack or you had him for a no gain. He turns it into a 10-yard gain. He has a lot of explosive plays where he scrambles to throw and scrambles to run. He's not a guy that just does one. He does both. And it's frustrating. You have to be really patient because, you know, you want to get him as a rusher, and then when you don't get him, you get frustrated, and it goes from being a lost yardage play to being, you know, 2nd and 5. He's really talented. Very impressed.
Georgia safety J.R. Reed had an even more colorful way of describing his impressions of Book, comparing him to one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in recent SEC history, the former Heisman Trophy winner at Texas A&M, Johnny Manziel. Here's J.R. Reed on that.
You know, Ian Book, he's a great quarterback. You know, it really shows up on film that he loves to extend his plays. You know, he can run the ball really well. It reminds me a lot of Johnny Manziel, and we're going to have to watch out for him and be able to contain him.
And then kind of diving more deeply in that, Reed had a funny exchange with a reporter about, you know, what you would do to stop him. Would you, put a defender to spy him the entirety of the game? And I thought Reed had kind of a funny answer when questioned about that. Here's more from Reed.
It's a runner, so you got everything covered, and then next thing you know, he squirts out and runs for 20 yards because everyone's back's turned. So we got to be able to, contain him, prevent him from extending the plays and making big plays. Do you spy him? I don't know. Would you? I mean, if you were the coach. Personally, if I was playing Madden, I might spy him.
I mean, I think we've all been there before. I'm not a big video game guy, but I've played enough Madden to know that sometimes when you're watching football, you do kind of think of it from that standpoint of how you would strategize this yourself if you're holding the controller in your hand as opposed to just watching it on the field in front of you or on the TV screen in front of you. But ultimately, when you hear the respect that Reed and Kirby Smart and others have for Ian Book, it obviously does set up a scenario where Georgia has a big question facing it on Saturday of what do you do to limit Book? What do you do to stop him when the Fighting Irish come to town? And I guess my suggestion off the top of our program today, DawgNation Daily presented by Box, my suggestion off the top here today is that the real issue in terms of what you do to limit Book may not be about how much you spy book with a defender, and it may not be really anything related to book whatsoever. Maybe what you do to neutralize the potential offensive weapons that Book has around him. Let me set this up in kind of a weird way. So late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, honestly can't remember which one it was now, I was watching Tom Hart and Jordan Rogers and Cole Kubelik, that trio that does the SEC Network game together. They also do kind of a streaming video show after that's over to kind of wrap up the weekend and kind of share their thoughts. I think those guys have pretty good chemistry together, and they're a pretty opinionated group, so I like kind of hearing what they say. We've had Tom Hart on the show plenty of times. Cole Kubelik's been on before, too. So, that's a group of guys whose opinions when it comes to college football I kind of respect. And they were talking about Alabama this past Saturday. In the midst of talking about Alabama and its wide receivers, now follow me here for a moment. In the midst of talking about Alabama and its wide receivers, Cole Kubelik relayed something that Kirby Smart had said to them about how that Georgia had game planned against Alabama's offense going back to the SEC championship game. And I believe what Kirby told Kubelik about how they defended Alabama may also have something to do this weekend with how Georgia tries to defend Notre Dame. So listen to Cole talking about Georgia defending Alabama and see if you think that same game plan might apply here to the Dogs in Notre Dame. Here's the SEC Network analyst Cole Kubelik.
We talked to Kirby at Media Days, and he said our plan was to jam them all night, get them off their routes, disrupt the timing, and it worked. Now, they got pressure, too, which Georgia had not really done all of last year.
So let's think about this for a moment. Yes, I know the Georgia-Alabama game didn't result in a UGA victory, but you'd have a hard time saying before DeAndre Walker left the game with an injury that Georgia didn't have a winning defensive game plan. Georgia did get pressure on Tua Tagovailoa, probably hit him as much as they hit any quarterback all season long, and hit Tua in the December SEC championship game about as much as any team had hit him at any point in time up till that point. And part of the way in which Georgia apparently got that pressure was making sure those really good Alabama wide receivers, and gosh knows they got speed and size and everything else. Georgia apparently, according to Kirby Smart, said the one thing we want to make sure we do on every snap is make sure that these receivers at the line know they're being defended. We want to pop them. We want to be physical. We want to press up on them and make sure we body them up right there. And I honestly believe that same type of defensive game plan may kind of transfer over here to what's going to happen with Georgia and Notre Dame on Saturday. Not because the Notre Dame receivers are as talented and as physical and speedy as the Alabama guys are. To be frank, they are not. But when you're looking to contain Ian Book, someone who wants to run and someone who wants to throw, if you take away that option to find a receiver open on your first read, all of a sudden now you've now limited the capabilities of what Book brings to the table. We spent a lot of time talking yesterday about how that ultimately, no matter how you slice this game up and no matter how you try to spin this from either team's perspective, the one thing you keep coming back to is the overwhelming talent advantage that Georgia enjoys in this game. And I believe a lot of that for Georgia rests with the defensive back. Now, not every defensive back that Georgia's going to play on Saturday is a former five-star. Eric Stokes plays like a former five-star in a lot of ways, but there is a lot of talent there, and it's deep, too. Let me give you an example of this. Kirby Smart was asked about his starting corners yesterday. He was asked about Eric Stokes. He was asked about Tyson Campbell, and listen to how quickly Kirby kind of pivots to the other guys in this cornerback group right now. Kirby Smart again.
Yeah, I'm excited about what Eric and Tyson have both done, but I'm also excited about Tyreek Stevenson and DJ, who continue to get better each day with their execution.
It's a pretty common theme from Kirby Smart. When given a chance to talk about his cornerbacks of the last few months, even dating back to the spring, the one thing that Kirby seems to pivot back to is the depth in this group. I think Kirby's pretty confident about these defensive backs, letting them play physical at the line of scrimmage on Saturday against the Notre Dame receivers. I think that's the kind of thing that Kirby and Georgia might be looking to do again, especially if we assume that Tyson Campbell, who had a big game against Arkansas State, is healthy. Now, we'll obviously have to wait and see how all that plays out over the course of the week. But Campbell is the example of a guy who presents a real challenge for any opposing offense. And after some rough moments of getting beat a little bit in 2018, apparently he's coming to his own here this season. In fact, to go back to J.R. Reed for a moment, as our buddy Connor Riley asked Reed yesterday kind of what he's seen from Campbell, and it's pretty clear he's seen some growth and some maturity and maybe something else that's important as well. Here's Reed on the subject.
He's got his confidence back. This Tyson year, Campbell, I told him just work on being your confidence back. Next play mentality. Don't worry about what happens before. And so what you saw out there on Saturday was a guy that had his full confidence back.
Full confidence back. That's a point that apparently Kirby Smart kind of agrees with as well, because let's face it, one of the big assets that Campbell has at his disposal right now is the experience he gained a year ago, and Smart also echoed that theme on Monday too.
Yeah, I'd say he's more confident. I think you can't help but be more confident after you go through a rookie season and you play in the SEC and you're playing opposite of D. Baker. So he got a lot of throws last year. He and Stokes both did. But he's a year older. He's a year stronger. He's a year more mature. He understands our system better, and it allows him to play with a little more confidence.
So listen, let me see if I can wrap up this entire discussion. Obviously, so much for Georgia is going to center on what it does with Ian Book on Saturday. But the real issue, hopefully we've learned over the last few minutes, is not necessarily what you do to limit Book, but what you do to limit Book's option. If his receivers are being bodied up by physical Georgia defensive backs, if they're being run with step for step, all of a sudden the dual threat, all of a sudden that's cut in half for Ian Book. And all of a sudden it's a lot easier to predict what he's going to do and potentially a lot easier to contain him. Yes, I know Jalen Hurts got free last year in the SEC Championship. We remember him using his legs to great effect and to great disappointment for UGA fans who are obviously trying to win that game. That tells me, though, this is a different Georgia defense with a different level of talent, maybe a different level of ability to scheme up for an opponent like this. I believe that on Saturday, Book's going to be turned into a one-dimensional quarterback, a quarterback forced to run because he's got no one else to throw to. And if Georgia knows that's coming, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier for them to stop that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by DeemerBox. And it's great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., DawgNation Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio noon, of course, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. And as a podcast, wherever you find them, Apple, Google, the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really, really glad to have you with us. And as I said before, really appreciate DeemerBox for making this all possible. Now, if you're watching on video, you can see the DeemerBox right now. Many of you listening radio podcast may be wondering, what in the world is this? So when I tell you this is military grade, I mean, it is military grade. You could drop this thing off the top of a skyscraper, and it's going to hold together. It's like the ultimate tailgating kind of apparatus, really. It's a Bluetooth speaker, like 40 hours of battery life. This thing, the Bluetooth speaker works from like 100 feet away. But when you open it up, it's like a Pelican-type carrying case. So on a day when you got expecting rain or you just got a bunch of knuckleheads hanging around your tailgate, you can put your valuable stuff kind of inside here, protect it really well. It's also got obviously a lot of outdoor usages as well. You know, you can take it. I know hunting season's opened up. This is a great thing to take with you out there. A lot of you gals like to go fishing on the weekend. It's a good opportunity there for you too. And we've got a great offer right now for DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers. Let me tell you more about this. You can go to the website, which is DeemerBox.com/DawgNation. DeemerBox.com/DawgNation. Use the promo code DawgNation. We're going to give you $50 off the first 100 orders. Now, we've already had a lot of folks take advantage of that, but still some opportunity for you today. $50 off the first 100 orders. Make sure you check out DeemerBox, DawgNation Daily, presented by DeemerBox here today. A couple other quick pieces of business to take care of. Of course, Jeff Sintel coming up as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. DawgNation Express, I told you this was going to happen, and it has. We're completely sold out. We have no more tailgate tickets, no more bus tickets. DawgNation Express is completely sold out. Huge thanks for Kroger and Pella Window and Door for making that possible. But we cannot fit any more people into our DawgNation Express tailgate. But it's going to be awesome on Saturday. I can't wait for it. So if you're going to be there, a part of it, and be with us, really excited about that. However, if you missed out on DawgNation Express, the doors are still open for our big Marlowe's matchup event this Thursday at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners. Our first time being there at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners. Really excited about being there for that. 5210 Town Center Boulevard. That's 5210 Town Center Boulevard in Peachtree Corners. We'll talk to Jeff and tell more about that in a moment. Let me let you hear a little bit of Brian Kelly before we get to Jeff Sintel here today. Kelly, weekly press conference yesterday. Great respect for UGA. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, here's what Kelly said about that.
You know, the talent that they have offensively, an outstanding offensive line. They're extremely physical and protects Jake Fromm very well. Probably 5 running backs that can touch the field and do great things with the ball in their hands. I don't know what else you say about them. It's just a very balanced offense that can run it and throw it, a quarterback that manages it extremely well. And that's before you even get to the defense.
But speaking of that defense, Kelly also pretty impressed with that group too. So much so that he kind of plays the heavy underdog card here at the end of this clip. Impressed with the Georgia offense, impressed with the Georgia defense too.
Obviously Kirby takes great pride in that defense. And this one's talented, but it's really deep as well, especially on the defensive line, that they can run 6, 7, we counted, I think, last night, 8 guys that are interchangeable. SEC top-level defense, well-coached and attacking. Probably not telling anybody here what you haven't seen. It's all true. It's all true. Very, very good defense. They can keep bringing players at you. We've seen some really great defenses over the last few years, but haven't had the kind of depth that they have. No perceived weaknesses in this group. So we'll try to muster together 22 guys, get them on a plane, go down to Athens, and see what we can do.
Interesting to hear Kelly kind of play the aw shucks card there at the end of, hey, we'll try to get 22 guys. We can find a play. We'll go down there and kind of see what happens. Kind of an interesting gamesmanship, I think, from Kelly with that line. He also references the SEC. Later on in today's show, we're going to bring on a special guest, Mike Frank, Irish Sports Daily, who knows the Irish really well. I'm going to ask him, does the fact that Notre Dame gets to play an SEC team here, does that mean anything to Notre Dame? Does that add any extra juice to the Irish on their side of this, what is obviously a highly anticipated matchup here at UGA? So we're going to look forward to doing a lot of talk about Georgia Notre Dame over the course of the next few days, including today on DawgNation Daily presented by Deemer Box. And obviously a big part of that is what's going to happen on the recruiting side of things as well. Long list of elite 4- and 5-star visitors to UGA. Let's find out more about that with our buddy Jeff Sintel as a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Great to have you with us on DawgNation Daily presented by Deemer Box.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Busy week for Georgia when it comes to recruiting. Of course, the guy that's on top of all of that is our buddy Jeff Sintel, and he joins us here now for our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. You can get bite-sized pieces of intel every single day at the forum at forum.dawgnation.com, and then frequently as well at the world-famous dawgnation.com when Jeff is checking in, including today, with kind of an official look at the visitors who are going to be in place in Athens on Saturday. Jeff Sintel, looking forward to talking to you about this over the course of the next few minutes. Appreciate you being with us, and I'm guessing you're going to probably say to me and to everybody else that when it comes to this visitors list, this is about as good as anything I can remember. How does it rank for you in terms of what you've seen Georgia do in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brandon. Good morning, everybody. This is one of those weeks where I kind of go from maybe reporter, insider, Brandon's wingman to kind of more like astronomer. That's when everybody bumps into me or sees me around campus or anywhere. They're like, so who's going to make it? And then some weird words will say, okay, who's not going to make it? And is this a problem for the program? Brandon, that's a good question. I'm currently marinating that one through my head. It's a Tuesday. It's already the list is already turned up on a Tuesday, but I would say right now it needs a little bit more juice, like maybe 4 or 5 more 5 stars to get it somewhere around 12 or 13. Because I seem to remember, I think it was 2017 when Georgia was just popping up. I think Georgia had more 5 stars when you sit there and you think about Owen Pappoe, Jaden Hazelwood, Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, Justin Fields. I think Georgia had a little bit more juice on the 5-star front. At least that's what it feels like to me. But we're only already on a Tuesday, and there are 5 stars coming in from Utah, Nevada, North Carolina, some Texas, some Louisiana 5 stars are also kind of thinking about it as well. So it should be a very fun week and a very busy week, and I'm sure that that team in red and black will give everybody a good show to watch on Saturday.
Our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Let's kind of dive in a little bit more deeply in a couple of these guys. Let me start with the tight ends. You've obviously talked a lot about Theo Johnson being there and Darnell Washington being there. I believe both these guys are taking official visits for this game, if I have my information correct on that. And, by now, Todd Hartley's tweets have made it pretty clear that Georgia's trying to build a kind of a super team tandem at this tight end position. I take some symbolic meaning in the fact that Johnson and Washington are willing to be here together. The fact that Georgia is willing to host both these guys together, I take that as a pretty symbolic representation of how comfortable Johnson and Washington are with that idea. It doesn't mean they're going to both say yes to the pitch from Georgia, but certainly they're comfortable with it. We know Georgia wants it. It is somewhat telling that these two guys are on campus together, is it not?
Yeah, it's a big deal, Brandon. I think that's the pitch to get them both together. And you will also see that on that list we published, I don't know, about 20, 25, 35 minutes ago on DawgNation.com. You'll also see that the other official visitor that's already confirmed for this weekend is quarterback Carson Beck and his family. And I think that's no small feat considering that Beck's going to be in town doing everything officially with both Theo Johnson and Darnell Washington as well. Those guys are going to be linked up. They're going to be buddied up. And I think that's a good thing for what Georgia's trying to build with the super team, especially some supersized options at the tight end spot. We'll have a lot from a lot of those guys over the course of this week, but I think that's very interesting. I think Georgia has to hit a home run and check all the bases with not just the Darnell Washington visit or the Theo Johnson visit, because the program has shown it can do that with regularity on official visits. I think it's the tandem aspect where both of them have to hear a plan and hear a pitch about how they will be used well together.
How well do you think Carson Beck compares to, Justin Fields was an incredible magnet for recruits on the recruiting trail. Jake Fromm was a offensive side of the ball leader of that 2017 class, much the same way LeCount was kind of a leader on that defensive side. How do you kind of compare Carson Beck's recruiting abilities to other quarterbacks that you've seen, and how effective of a weapon do you think he could be for Georgia this weekend? He's obviously seen what he needs to see from Georgia, but how good is he at conveying that message to undecided folks like Washington, Johnson, and whoever else might happen to be there?
It's funny, Brandon. I think most of Mr. Beck's gravity takes place in the state of Florida. A lot of the boys in the state of Florida know him really well. He's connected with guys like Gravon Dexter, Jalen Carter, just about all the receivers in the state of Florida and defensive backs know about him. They're well aware of him. Carson is the reigning Mr. Football in the state of Florida, even though he's got off to a sort of rocky start to his senior season down there for Mandarin High. I would say that, his poll really works better for the state of Florida, but also, folks, I think they forget a lot of times as Alabama still searches for its 2020 quarterback, and we hear all these rumblings on the recruiting trail about five-star Bryce Young potentially flipping from USC to Alabama. But at one time, Carson Beck was Alabama's 2020 quarterback, and he was visiting there as an Alabama recruit. And folks got to know him on the national stage a little bit. All these prospects did as the big-time talent that was committed to Alabama. So I just think it's different, Brandon, with the way Beck can attract and appeal to different recruits. Kind of not the same lane as a Justin Fields and a Jake Fromm was. Those guys were actually more home-based in Georgia, and then they started flapping their wings, so to speak, when they went to the national events like the opening. I think Carson Beck will be a major benefactor or a major ambassador for Georgia this weekend. But don't forget, five-star running back Kendall Milton, a very down-low OG recruiter for Georgia, is going to be in town this weekend as well. There's Pete Ratledge going to be there. Currently, the list has 7 of the 16 public commitments in town for this weekend, and a lot of them just can't make it because of game. Mikhail Sherman's a great example. He's another effective recruiter, but IMG Academy and St. John's College in Washington, D.C. play a game on Saturday. I believe that kickoff's at 2 p.m. in D.C., and it's just not very possible unless somebody hops on Corey Wren's back or something like that for anybody to play a game from 2 to 5 in D.C. on Saturday and then be in Athens town for Georgia Notre Dame at 8 p.m.
It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with Jeff Sintel. Of course, I want to remind you again how excited I am about this upcoming Thursday for our first live broadcast of Marlowe's matchup this season at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners. Can't wait to have you there and be a part of that. The address once again in Peachtree Corners, 5210 Town Center Boulevard. That's 5210 Town Center Boulevard. It comes up this Thursday. Myself, John Stinchcomb, looking ahead to Notre Dame. You better believe we'll be talking plenty of recruiting there too. So come on by and see us. Let's hang out. Let's talk some football and enjoy some great food, some craft cocktails, chef-inspired food there at Marlowe's Tavern. Of course, famous for their hospitality. They're going to be rolling out the red carpet for us this upcoming Thursday. Can't wait to have you there for that. Let's talk about Noah Sewell now, Jeff, for a minute too, because Sewell, I believe, is also coming in for a big visit to Georgia, an official visit for Sewell as well, I believe. And I'll admit, because of the fact that he's from Utah, I got a brother playing from Oregon, I'm not as confident that I know exactly what it is that he's looking for from Athens on Saturday. If it's a kid from Florida or Alabama or Georgia, then I think I have a pretty good idea. SEC footprint, wants SEC atmosphere, wants that kind of rabid crowd and intensity of the game. You know, for Sewell, who's, you know, from a long way away, different region of the country, what's important to him about a visit this weekend?
I think it's just a big football experience. I think there's no small secret that Noah Sewell wants to test his game against the very best players in the country, and there's no small coincidence, Brandon, that two of the three teams that have been long-time scheduled official visits for Mr. Sewell are in the SEC. That's Georgia and Texas A&M. I think he's going to be impressed by the fervor and the crowd and just what SEC football and Georgia football and a big-time home game will look like in Athens. He's a guy that's just now bouncing back from an injury he suffered early in his high school season during fall camp, and he's going to be in town. I'm sure all the pomp and circumstances of things like game day, a night game inside Sanford Stadium, I think that will impress him a lot because, you know, most of his background is Nevada, University of Nevada, University of Oregon. His brother plays there. It'll be very interesting to see. And really what he's always stated to me is he wants to find a place where he fits in, where he feels a part of a group with the linebacker room. And I don't know, some of his social media, Brandon, I know you still need to get your black belt in Instagram, but he's been tagging current Georgia players about looking forward to seeing them in Athens this weekend, guys like Tate Crowder. He really feels like there's already a good fit with him inside Glenn Schumann's inside linebacker room at the University of Georgia. And this is a visit I think I would watch really closely because I don't think Noah is currently tethered to any sort of All-American game to announce his decision. So he's a guy that has told me in the past that he wants to make his decision before his senior year is over.
Let me ask you a practical question before we move on and talk about a couple of other things. When Georgia has this many visitors on campus, you know, there were moments last year where you had a lot of these elite recruits on the campus, on the field at the same time. What kind of challenge does that present for Kirby Smart, for the assistant coaches, in terms of making sure everybody gets the love they need to see, especially for someone like Sewell, who relationships may be important for? How important is it for Georgia, and I guess more importantly, how difficult is it for Georgia to make sure it gives enough quality face time to everyone who wants it, needs it? Is that a challenge for the UGA coaches on a weekend like this?
I don't think it's a challenge at all, Brandon. I think it's something that they would relish, and I think that's what they work for and they recruit so hard for. Is there's a moment like this Saturday that, let's face it, Brandon, there's only going to be probably two crowds like this inside Sanford Stadium this year. I don't think there was one like this one inside Sanford Stadium last year, and yet the Tennessee game was one that kind of sealed the deal a little bit for Lewis Seen, and then the Auburn game was one that, you know, really got the feels going for Tyreek Stevenson last year in the 2019 class. But, man, I think this one's going to be beyond bonkers. Let me reference the examples of how Georgia tries to recruit, Brandon. And when you think about assistant coaches and so many prospects and how much time, let me share an example from David Daniel. David Daniel was at the Murray State game of all things, and Charlton Warren, the defensive backs coach, came and grabbed his little sister, which is a 2-year-old sister, and he just trotted her around the field during warm-up prior to that game.
Wow, yeah.
And Brennan, that was some of the most effective recruiting Charlton Warren could do. Number one, because this is a young lady that doesn't warm up to a lot of strangers really fast, but she was a fast friend with Charlton Warren, and David Daniel and his family, the 2021 recent commitment, are watching Charlton, and they're watching their young daughter, Araya, and they're getting the cheese, and they're getting the big wild smiles, the big grins, and they knew that they saw something special at Georgia. Another part of Daniel's visit is Eric Stokes was, of all people, one of the players just came by and just said, "Welcome to Georgia," to David Daniel, and that meant a whole lot. Kirby Smart walks by, and there's not really much left for him to do. All he says is, "Enjoy the game, son." They end up talking afterward. I think the big stretch of time, Brandon, because I think like Theo Johnson, for example, and Darnell, for example, they both have off weekends this weekend with their high school programs. So they will be in on Friday afternoon, Friday evening. I think Theo's plan lands somewhere around 6 p.m., or he gets into Athens at 6 p.m. on Friday night. So they'll have a lot of time on Friday and a lot of time on game day to just marinate in all that Athens, Georgia has to offer this weekend. And, that's a good story there with Stokes and Daniel. It reminds me of guys like Nicole Hardman coming over to prospective recruits on the sidelines and just quickly dapping a guy up, saying, "Welcome to Georgia." And that stuff goes a long way when that love is shown during pregame, right before a game, when they're there supposedly to watch a game and to watch these players perform, and those players carve out a little niche of time just to swing by really fast in the middle of a drill.
You've reported in the forum at forum.DawgNation.com that you don't expect five-star running back Zachary Evans to be in Athens on Saturday. Is that meaningful in any way? Does that symbolize anything in terms of Evans' current relationship with UGA?
Brandon, I think that's a good thing for what's most important for Zachary Evans right now. I think Zachary Evans needs to focus on his high school team, his high school season, and his high school football program, rather than another marquee visit to go check out a college program. I think that's an example of a good thing for Zachary Evans by not being in Athens this weekend. I think he needs to take care of his high school program and its needs and obligations first.
Jeff Sintel, really good stuff. Thanks for being a part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We'll see folks this Thursday, 6 p.m. at the Marlowe's in Peachtree Corners for our Marlowe's matchup with John Stinchcomb. And, Jeff, I'll see you Wednesday for Before the Hedges as well. Talk to you then.
Yeah, Brandon, what are we going to talk about, sir?
There'll be plenty to do, no doubt about that.
Thanks, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really excited about Saturday, excited about the atmosphere that's going to be in place. It's going to be kind of a historic day for Georgia in terms of, I've heard as many as, I hear all these numbers. There could be as many as 100,000 people in Athens on Saturday that don't have tickets, in addition to the 93, 94, however many it's going to get into being that do. It's just going to be a crazy day. It was crazy back in 2017 when these two teams got together. It's going to be the same way again. In some respects, it's sort of hard to know why it keeps getting as big as it does, but the hype is pretty much off the charts. And, of course, for a lot of you that live in major cities or outside kind of our typical Dog Nation footprint, you'd like to be able to create your own atmosphere like that. And one of the best ways I think you can do that is to find a UGA alumni group in your area. There are a lot of them, and you can be a part of one of the watch parties that goes on there. I mean, listen, there are, as I said before, 324,000 alumni kind of spread out here, more than 80 chapters of the UGA Alumni Association, and many of them get together and watch these kinds of games, which creates a great atmosphere. It's a great way to make friends because, let's face it, the kinds of people that you went to school with, even if you didn't know them, are the kinds of people that you're likely to have a lot in common with right now. So a great way to build those relationships. It's also a great way to keep up to date with all the things the UGA Alumni Association is doing to raise money for the school and also contributing acts of service for the school as well. We have been talking about the UGA Alumni Association for a long time, and I'm always amazed by just how forward-thinking they are in terms of making the next generation for UGA even better than the school that so many of my audience has experienced. And so I would invite you to go to this website to kind of get more involved and just have some fun, maybe by watching a game as soon as this weekend. How about alumni.uga.edu/game watching? That website one more time, alumni.uga.edu/game watching, and certainly enjoy the game wherever you happen to be this upcoming weekend. Now, speaking of games, of course, Georgia Notre Dame, not the only big one. Let's take a moment to preview the other big games of the weekend. I'll give you kind of a brief thought on a few of these. And by the way, Mike Frank, Irish Sports Daily, going to join us a couple of minutes after that. Tennessee is at Florida. Florida's a 2-touchdown favorite. The big story here is that Kyle Trask is now the quarterback after the pretty horrific Felipe Franks injury. And I like making fun of Florida as much as anybody. I'm not going to make fun of Franks, though, after that injury. Kind of a scary scene there that night. Thankfully, the TV didn't show the replay more than they did. However, the football part of this, I hate to say it this way, but it's just true. You can get college football fans in some measure, at least a lot of college football fans, you can get them to believe virtually anything. You got a lot of Florida fans right now who are convinced that Kyle Trask is going to step in and be the savior of Florida season. Do y'all realize that he's going to start his first game Saturday since he was like a freshman in high school? Trask essentially was not a starter for his high school team, but he's going to be the starter for the Florida Gators. This is the classic example of just believing what you want to believe. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Florida's going to lose to Tennessee, but as bad as Tennessee's been, do I think they could keep this closer on Saturday than the experts might think? Yeah, I do. First of all, I've kind of gone in on Tennessee too much to sell low on them now. Being a little more competitive with Florida, it's certainly a possibility. Florida has some real problems, and switching from Felipe Franks to Kyle Trask is not going to fix much of that. LSU's at Vanderbilt. They are huge favorite, much the same way Georgia was. I'm guessing you'll also see the stands pretty much loaded with LSU fans, much the same way it was with Georgia a little earlier, too. This entire thing could be a carbon copy when it comes to all of that. Watch out for Ole Miss against Cal on Saturday. I know most people think of Ole Miss being a terrible team. I've suggested that they are among the worst in the SEC. Doesn't mean they couldn't be a little bit of a team to watch as a slight home favorite against Cal. I think Auburn, Texas A&M is a great game. A&M getting a little bit of a favorite's advantage because they're playing at home. Historically, remember this. A&M has not always played well in its SEC home games, and a lot of those have come against Auburn. Now, has that recently changed? Yeah. But Kyle Field has not always been the house of horrors for the opposition that you might think it should be. South Carolina, Missouri, I think is a very interesting game. Kentucky, Mississippi State, pretty interesting. I'm also watching outside the SEC a little bit. I'm going to watch for Michigan at Wisconsin. I'll tell you why. A lot of attention being paid to Jim Harbaugh right now from the standpoint that Harbaugh has just underperformed at Michigan. There's no way around that. One of the things he has not done, although he's been an underdog a few times, they haven't won a game outright as an underdog since Harbaugh's been there. There are plenty of people who tell you it's over and done. Harbaugh has been proven to be an overrated coach. But just how true is that? We may find out against Wisconsin for the Wolverines a little bit on Saturday. We'll make that your SEC throw. I'll also remind you about my friends at MyBookie. Of course, if you're looking to get some action down on any of these games, MyBookie, a great place to go for that. Big first deposit bonus. You can get your first deposit doubled, but you got to use the promo code DawgNation. All one word. By the way, it's supposed to be DAWG, all one word, DawgNation, at MyBookie. After that, you play, you win, you get paid. So just type in MyBookie to your browser. Get in there. They've also got great player perks for you all season long. And if you're a daily fantasy player or whatever, they've got some really cool kind of over-unders things you can do about how many fantasy points a player is going to score each game. So use your fantasy knowledge to also benefit your wagering, too. That's all going on at MyBookie. Find them online. Type in MyBookie, and then use the promo code DawgNation. You can get a big first deposit bonus. All right, it's great to have you with us today here on DawgNation Daily, presented by DeemerBox. I want to look a little bit more closely at the situation with Georgia and Notre Dame on Saturday. And I want to get some information coming from the South Bend side of things. A guy we've had on the program a few times before is Mike Frank. Does a great job covering the Irish for Irish Sports Daily, and he joins us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by DeemerBox here today. Mike, welcome back to our program. Hope you're doing well, and we really appreciate you making some time for us today.
Yeah, no problem, Brandon. How are you, man?
I'm doing really well. It's kind of funny. You know, you and I talked for the first time, I want to say probably summer of 2017. At that point in time, the first Georgia-Notre Dame game seemed like a long way away. Certainly the return date back to Athens seemed forever away, and here we are on Saturday about to officially conclude this little short two-game series for these two teams. It's been fun from our side of things to have Georgia involved in kind of this intersectional matchup. I'm sure that Notre Dame would kind of feel the same way, I guess. So looking forward to seeing these two teams back together on Saturday.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think at that time both of us were kind of in the same position of, hey, we're rebuilding this thing and we think we're on the verge of something pretty special. And it turned out, you know, for both teams, we're kind of both on the cusp of that. And this will probably be a big determination as how well each team's season goes. And so huge game for Notre Dame, huge game for Georgia. You know, I didn't feel real great about the game in 2017, and I probably feel a little less confident in this game. You know, I think Notre Dame's got some issues they need to clean up, and I have not been real impressed with their play so far, and so it will be an interesting game to see whether they can fix all the issues they have before this game, because they're going to need to. I think Georgia matches up really well with Notre Dame, and I'd have to give the advantage to Georgia right now.
Well, one of the things from the Georgia side that has come up a lot when looking at Notre Dame is obviously Ian Book. Georgia has not always fared great against running quarterbacks. Many defenses don't. Jalen Hurts, for instance, in the SEC championship game a year ago, unfortunately for my audience, comes to mind. So there's a lot of respect in Athens for Book. As someone who watches every snap that he takes, what can you tell us about what makes Ian such a dangerous quarterback to defend?
Well, the thing about Book is he sees things very, very quickly, and he can get the ball out very, very quickly. And that, I think, is his best strength. He's very, very good at reading defenses. He's pretty good with the RPO. And, the thing that's been kind of crazy with him is lately teams have been putting a lot of pressure on him, and he hasn't reacted well. Before, he was reacting better to that, but really at the end of USC last year, the USC game and the Clemson game, he didn't handle it very well. And so far, he hasn't done that great of a job until really about the second quarter of last week, and he started to look like Ian Book again. So that was an encouraging sign for Irish fans, that he started to play like the player we thought and had been hoping for. But, he's had some struggles recently and hasn't been quite as accurate and quite as efficient as he was before. So I think it's probably a case of, a guy putting too much on his shoulders, wants to be the guy. He's a captain for the first time. And I think it's just one of those things where he's just trying to do too much. And he needs to just be the guy he is, which is a distributor of the football. And I think if they can talk him into that, you'll see a better Ian Book on Saturday night. But, I'm just a little bit worried about Notre Dame being able to run the ball and stop the run in this game.
Yeah, let me talk about that second part of that for a moment, because obviously Georgia fans have noticed that statistically the Irish have had a difficult time in stopping the run, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Georgia's got waves of running backs. Now, oftentimes games aren't as easy to handicap as that. One team's performed poorly in stopping the run. One team has good running backs, so it's cut and dry, as simple as that. But it is a little bit of a glaring issue in this game. One area in which Georgia has made a concerted effort to remain strong at would be an area in which Notre Dame's had some trouble up to this point in time. How could that potentially be different for Notre Dame than some people expect it to be?
Well, they have a bunch of young guys playing. They've got a first-time starter at the rover position, which is an outside linebacker position. They have a buck position, a guy who has played there before but wasn't very successful. He's back there now, and actually had a really good game last week, so that's encouraging. And then a brand-new Mike linebacker, and I think that's been a real big problem with them. It's just kind of maybe overrunning plays, not taking the best angles to plays. I think that those have been really the main issues they've had. The front has done a pretty solid job of clogging up the middle, but there's usually just some crease, and I'm a little bit worried about Georgia getting to the perimeter. Obviously DeAndre Swift is very fast and one of the best running backs in the country, and they're going to have to stop him somehow. And if they can't stop him, it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame.
I want to talk to you about the atmosphere for the game for a moment. For Georgia fans, it's almost even difficult to explain why the game is as anticipated as it is. It's a top 10 matchup. That helps. Georgia hasn't played a lot of non-conference intersectional games like this. That's a big deal. Notre Dame obviously has the historic cachet as well. Longtime college football fans certainly know all of that. So kind of all of that kind of mixes together for really one of the most anticipated home games that I can remember Georgia having, and I've been around for a while. It's been a while since Georgia's had one that's as anticipated as this one is. On the Notre Dame side of things, virtually at least about half the games that Notre Dame plays are a version of a game like this, where it's going into some other region of the country and, getting a lot of extra attention because of what the Irish brings to the table. But I'm curious about one point in particular. The fact that Notre Dame is playing an SEC team here, and the fact that, listen, there's no shortage of SEC pride from the schools in this conference. Does that change the calculus at all for Notre Dame and make it bigger than the typical big game? I know that Kelly briefly mentioned the SEC and remarking something about Georgia yesterday, but overall, the fact that Georgia has the SEC logo in its uniform, does that do anything for Notre Dame at all?
I'm not sure it does anything for Notre Dame in particular, but I do think it does something for Notre Dame in the eyes of people who matter. And I think that that's the most important thing. I think Notre Dame, and it's kind of an interesting thing. Irish fans and Notre Dame get kind of bashed because they won't join a conference. But when Georgia fans and all fans need to look at this situation, and that heck, Georgia fans are very excited to play Notre Dame in this environment, and the same goes for Notre Dame and Notre Dame fans. Why would we want to give up the ability to go play these big giant games and everybody get excited? There would be no reason to do that unless you absolutely have to. I mean, these environments are what every college football player wants to be in, what every fan wants to be in. Nobody cares about, Notre Dame beating the crap out of Northeast Louisiana State or, one of those teams. Nobody cares about that. They want to see Notre Dame, Georgia, and that's why Notre Dame remains independent. That's why their fans want to remain independent. So they can go play Georgia. They can go play Texas A&M. They can go play Arkansas. They play Wisconsin and Green Bay, at the Packers field here shortly. So having the flexibility to do that is huge. And so I think it's Notre Dame fans and Notre Dame itself realize this is a huge opportunity. And every time they've been in this kind of environment, they've always come up a little bit short or sometimes way short. And so I think the big thing is just showing people that Notre Dame football is back and a team to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, I think the matchup in this game is going to make that difficult for Notre Dame. I just think Georgia has the type of strengths that match up very well against Notre Dame's weaknesses, and so that's going to make it a difficult task for Notre Dame. But one thing I will say is, however Notre Dame looked, I mean, gosh, if you look at last year, I mean, they really struggled against Ball State. They really struggled against Vanderbilt, and then came out and won 12 games. So again, it's however they looked is not probably how they're going to look on Saturday. One thing about this team is they do play hard. They are a team that plays with a lot of effort and a lot of fire. It's just I worry about some inside linebackers, outside backers getting lost. And if that's the case, that's going to be a tough situation for Notre Dame.
Let me do one more thing before we let you go, and we'll make this kind of a two-part question. In 2017 in September, Georgia fans traveling to Chicago and South Bend for that became just a huge thing. And I think for those of us who were there and a part of that, it's still the kind of thing that we talk about, how weird it looked to see what looked to be like 20-something thousand fans at a Cubs game on a Friday night, and every street corner in Chicago being loaded with red and black going into South Bend. And obviously there was a huge showing from UGA fans there that day in South Bend. What was the Notre Dame response to seeing that many Georgia fans? And I guess I'm also curious of how big of a travel initiative might be in place for Notre Dame fans in terms of coming into Athens. I'm presuming Atlanta's a pretty big alumni hub for the university, as big as any major city would be, I'm guessing. What's the kind of Notre Dame idea about trying to make their way into the Peach State and be in Athens themselves this upcoming weekend?
Well, I know there's certainly a lot of guys that are trying to get tickets. I know that there's quite a few people I know who are successful in getting them. There's no way they're going to get anywhere near the number of people that Georgia did. And the problem with Notre Dame is they have a global audience. And so what that means is there's people all over the world who like Notre Dame. There's also people all over the world who donate to Notre Dame. Therefore, they get access to tickets. And, chances are when you live in Los Angeles, you can really only afford to go to Notre Dame maybe once or twice. And so what happens is these people, sell their tickets and try and make a profit on these tickets so they can pay for their 2 trips that they do make.
Yeah.
And I hate seeing that. Notre Dame could do something about that, but they refuse to do something about that. And I know a lot of Irish fans are very angry about that. But, when you talk to the people who live out in L.A., they say, you know what, I have access to tickets. I get access by donating. With Georgia, obviously, I'd say probably 70% of their fans are within 100 square miles of the city. And so that's a big advantage. And, it's kind of like I live in Nebraska, and, every single person that I know goes to every single game. So you can't do that as a Notre Dame fan living in Los Angeles or living in New York or in Florida. It's just too darn expensive to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, Mike, we appreciate your time and your expertise on Georgia's opponent for this upcoming Saturday. And for the folks who might want to find out a little bit more about what's going on with Notre Dame and some of the ways in which these two programs have overlapped in recruiting, because whether it be Tommy Tremble or Kyle Hamilton, some names like that, there has been some overlap here. How can folks find Irish Sports Daily online?
That's it. Go to irishsportsdaily.com and check us out. We got a lot of good coverage about the game, and looking forward to it. I'm really excited about it, and I know Georgia fans were wonderful when they were up here, and that was exciting and encouraging that they showed such class, in the win and everything, and I'm certain Notre Dame fans will do the same.
Well, that's great to hear. And I know a lot of Georgia fans are looking forward to returning some of the hospitality because I'm not just saying this. It's been well documented. Notre Dame really rolled out the red carpet. I'm presuming they do that for every opponent, but Georgia fans felt especially honored to have been in a Notre Dame stadium 2 years ago. So they're looking forward to hopefully getting a chance to return that favor to the Irish here this weekend as well.
All right, sounds good. Well, we'll talk hopefully soon.
Sounds good. That's Mike Frank there, Irish Sports Daily. Really good stuff from him. By the way, while I have your attention, let me also remind you about some good stuff coming up with our friends at Callaway Resort and Gardens. They have their new Fall Adventure Pass. It's an activity pass program, and listen, the fall is a great time to get to Callaway Resort and Gardens, and the Fall Adventure Pass is a great way to take advantage of a lot of the things they have going on. Maximize both the fun and the savings of all of that. Here's a couple things it includes: bike rental, treetop adventure, tennis time, shore fishing. Great price as well. It's just $40 plus tax and fees. You can go to CallawayGardens.com to find out more about that. You can also purchase at the Callaway Information Center at the Treetop Adventure Course as well. So CallawayGardens.com to find out more about that. Yeah, when I tell you my family loves Callaway Resort and Gardens, and that's not puffery. That's indeed the case. We had a great time there this past summer, and I think the fall, cooler temperatures, boy, what a great time to be in a beautiful, beautiful location. Short drive from Atlanta, too. Easy to get there. Callaway Gardens, the Fall Adventure Pass, Callaway Resort and Gardens, a great, great weekend getaway. Don't forget, bye week next Saturday, pretty good chance to take advantage of some of that. All right, really good stuff on the program here today. By the way, game day in Athens on Saturday. What's the chance we could get a Gator Hater sign on the game day set on Saturday? Can we get one of those big festival poles, something like that? Is there any chance our buddy Eddie can make his way onto the TV screen on Saturday? Maybe a little bit of a long shot. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the atmosphere. Would love nothing more than a little Gator Hater sign to show up. Send them a message to the folks in Gainesville that Georgia hasn't forgotten about them. Georgia's got some business to take care of, and as Florida continues to roll along and do whatever they're going to do with their backup quarterback and everything else, just remind them that, listen, it's been a little while since they've had some success against the Georgia Bulldogs. It's going to be a little while longer. By the way, how about that? 1,053 days. That's our Gator Hater updater. That's how long since Florida's beaten Georgia. Thanks for being with us on DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box. We'll look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Looking forward to chatting with all of you. Your thoughts about the game, your thoughts about what Mike Frank had to say about the Notre Dame side of things. Interesting to hear him. Maybe representative of Notre Dame fans, not all that confident about what Notre Dame is going to be able to do on Saturday. I've obviously made my case that I don't think it's going to be a close game, and I heard from some of you on Twitter about this yesterday, and I guess the general feeling was, BA, don't get it in front of yourself. Don't give Notre Dame bulletin board material. Obviously, Brian Kelly's already trying to use some of that, this notion of they're the underdog looking to shock the world, and Georgia's the big bad behemoth out of the SEC. That's the gamesmanship they're trying to employ right now, which I guess probably, if you're a coach, you use everything at your disposal. He feels like that at his disposal right now. However, part of the reason why I've been outspoken in my confidence about Georgia in this game is really twofold, maybe even three. On the one hand, I do think that the perceived advantage Georgia has is going to play into the game plan because obviously, even as a big favorite, Georgia's not impervious to mistakes. Therefore, I think there could be a temptation on Georgia's part to coach as a way of avoiding a mistake, to not let a mistake beat you, for instance, so you don't get too aggressive, you don't get too out of control. That temptation could potentially be there for Georgia. On the Notre Dame side of things, Brian Kelly's no fool. He has to know the talent gap that his team has in comparison to UGA. Does he try to coach in this game as a way of keeping it close so that if a mistake comes, his team can take advantage of that? I mean, as I said before, Georgia's not impervious to all of it. I also think the era of, Georgia fans kind of taking the page out of Larry Munson's book or maybe the Vince Dooley book of having to be afraid in games like this, I just think we're in a new era when it comes to that. And I don't think that Georgia fans should have any shortage of confidence going into this game on Saturday on behalf of their team. So let us dive in here and see what's going on in our comment section. Let me start on. Actually, I started on YouTube yesterday. Let me start on first because I can't really tell what people are even talking. Let me go to Facebook first, and then I will get over here to the YouTube side of things in just a minute. And of course, it's always great to have you. And as I'm transitioning over here, let me also remind you that our friends at RS Andrews make this all possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They play all those positions for us here, DawgNation. Can play all those positions for you too, especially when it's been as hot as it has been. You want that mega tune-up from our friends at RS Andrews to get your air conditioning unit back to factory fresh specs. Not just a tune-up, it's a mega tune-up. You'll get it from my friends at RS Andrews. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Reed Patak, and I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. Maybe it's like Paddock, like the Paddock Philippe. Maybe maybe one way or another. He says no blackout, courtesy of head coach Kirby Smart. I certainly made my case yesterday. This game doesn't need that. I'm not against the black jerseys in particular. I think the blackout in the stadium looked really, really cool. When it's been done well, I mean, it's just a sea of black. It's kind of amazing to see. This game's got enough trappings as it is, and Kirby Smart said on what would have been Saturday night or Saturday afternoon after the game that big games like this oftentimes are won by the team that doesn't make too much out of them, keeps and maintains the same kind of mentality. And that means no black jerseys. Wyatt Filton says, what do you want to see from Fromm this weekend? I think it's a really good question, Wyatt, and I kind of foreshadowed my thought on this before. Because Georgia's a big favorite and because it's likely going to take a mistake to beat them, I think you could potentially have a temptation where you say, if you're Georgia, let's just use our offensive line, let's just use our running backs, let's just limit our ability to make a mistake or our potential for making a mistake. Let's not get too risky. But that's not what I want to see Georgia do. I want to see Georgia go out there and play with kind of, I don't want to say reckless abandon, whatever the level below reckless abandon is. I want to see Georgia go out there and play with a little bit of moxie, a little bit of swagger. I mean, this is a TV show. Notre Dame looks good on TV. Their uniforms, that gold dome, that presents well on CBS. It does. The CBS folks, you better believe, we're going to have Brad Nesser on the show later on this week. The CBS folks are as excited about this as anybody is. Good show on TV. Georgia's got to use this. You got guys sitting in the stands, 5-star this, 5-star that. Put on a show for them. So offensive line, running backs, I don't know that Notre Dame can stop that. And I want to get greedy. I want to say, well, if that's the case, then Georgia needs to use those running backs to set up play action. And all of a sudden, take some of these new toys for a spin, whether it be James Cook on the outside, whether it be Pickens and Blaylock going deep, whatever else. Justin Glaze says, injury update. We'll talk to our buddy Connor Riley about that in a moment. He was in Athens yesterday. We'll let him give some deets on that. Richard Smith says, what will the new attendance be? I think we're going to top out 93-something on Saturday. I think the additional seats going to put Georgia just below 94,000. I saw a picture of these things on Twitter yesterday. They're actually, you won't even notice them. They're actually pretty small. Gary Strickland says, how many people in Athens show up on Saturday night? I'm guessing you may get, is it crazy to say there could be 200,000 additional non-Athenians in the ACC area on Saturday night?
200,000 seems 150 definitely. 200,000 good. I don't know where we're going to hold all.
So that's my question. So Connor, I know you're busy, but hang out for just 1 second. Do you think if there's as many people as you just said, 150,000 people, which means somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 people who come and don't plan on watching the game, is that visibly noticeable? Are 60,000, 70,000, if it's 60 to 75,000 non-ticketed patrons who are just in Athens to sort of see and be seen, is that visibly noticeable? Will it look different than a normal Georgia Saturday?
I think it depends where might choose to be outside of the stadium. If they have a lot of people there on the bridge, which I think is a very good chance that might be the case.
Yeah, it's a good call.
That's going to be noticeable. Downtown, Athens has been called the zoo downtown before.
Right.
This won't be a zoo. This will be, maximum occupancy place where it's overflowing with people.
let me tell you this too. This is the one PSA I'm going to give you for the weekend. Y'all don't go down there and start acting the fool now. They're going to get rid of you in 2 seconds. Don't be acting crazy downtown because you're going to be gone.
I'm going to save my larger commentary on this for Friday, but don't be a jerk this weekend. Just don't be a jerk. Not you, obviously.
Yeah.
I am just, and it doesn't apply to 95% of Georgia fans. For those 5%, just don't be a jerk this week.
Although, and let me try to be very careful how I say this because I want to walk the tightrope. I think you can create an intense atmosphere without creating a obnoxious atmosphere, without creating something that's distasteful. I do think it's more important to create an intense atmosphere than it is to create a hospitable atmosphere. Am I wrong for saying that?
I don't think this is going to be a wine and cheese crowd, if you will, on Saturday. It's going to be a very pumped up, vocal, into it fan base. However, you can still do that without obviously going over the line and doing the certain sort of things that gets your videos blown up all over YouTube.
I mean, in general, I'm in favor of not acting like an idiot at any point in time anyway. But I am looking forward to seeing how this plays out. But to go back to the thing about the downtown Athens, I know some of y'all are used to going to now for many of you, know the Athens scene very well. But for those of you who are used to walking around New Orleans or Savannah or one of these places where it's like, really even a lot of places like suburban Atlanta are like this now, where it's like open container, just pretty much anything goes. Downtown Athens is not that town, y'all. Do not act crazy in Athens because they're looking to thin the herd. They're looking to get people off those streets. They're going to have paddy wagons parked at every intersection. So y'all do not act crazy. Billy Hurley says Tyler makes a cake out of book. I don't know why that makes me laugh, but it does. Kyle Clarkson says, I really hope Blaylock's able to play. There's nothing wrong with Dominic Blaylock.
Blaylock's one of the actual healthy wide receivers.
Please don't put that in the universe. Don't spit that out into the universe. We don't need that in the universe. Amos Williams says, call some downfield passing plays. Yeah, you hope to see it. William and Elaine Morgan says, I'd like to see 50-50 pass and run. That's an interesting ratio on that.
Don't think we're going to see that.
Probably shouldn't. I mean, I kind of get your point. I mean, I want Georgia to take its shots. I want Georgia to take some big shots in this game. I was thinking more along the lines of, I don't necessarily want to see 50-50 in terms of passing plays called and running plays called. That's probably not a great sign. But in terms of what the overall stats end up looking like at the end, that could get kind of interesting. Kevin Cook says, I was treated great in South Bend. Yeah, they did treat Georgia fans very well.
Do you think Jake Fromm throws more passes on Saturday than he did against Arkansas State?
Probably fewer, if I'm having to guess.
22 passing attempts against Arkansas State.
Probably fewer. Tony Price on YouTube says 60-40 running. I mean, you just heard, a guy pretty plugged into Notre Dame say he's quite concerned about their rush defense. So, that kind of tells you what you need to know there. Lou Dog says, list of how Georgia beats Notre Dame. Show up. That's it. Notre Dame is ranked 120th in run defense, and all we do is run the ball 48-17. Yeah, Lou, that's about what I think. It's about what I think. I don't think this game's close. I'm not going to apologize for feeling that way. As I said before, that doesn't mean that Georgia's is as impervious to mistakes, but you can't really handicap mistakes into your equation. I think there's a pretty sizable gap between Georgia and Notre Dame. I said this for 3 reasons yesterday, and I'll make this very quick, and then we'll kind of get back to it. I think that Arkansas State's a better team than some people realize. They were 60th last week in SP Plus on ESPN.com. I think when you look at the recruiting gap that's formed over the last 4 cycles, with Brian Kelly obviously being at Notre Dame, and since Kirby Smart's coming in at Georgia, and these 2 teams played in 2017, they had been of a similar recruiting profile going back to 2010. Not always the same class, but within like 1 standard deviation of each other. Not as of late. Notre Dame's averaging about a 12th, 13th ranked class the last 4 years. Georgia's averaging about a 2nd or a 3rd. That's a huge difference in the number of really, truly impactful players on the field. Pine Sol Lemon Scent says Georgia needs to make a statement and run up the score. So, Pine Sol, I understand where you're coming from with the idea of statement. I do believe that statement games exist. However, I think the one thing as a Georgia fan you got to be careful about, we'll probably start talking about this on Monday because I do have a good bit of confidence how this game's going to play out. So looking ahead past Notre Dame, I think it's going to be really important for Georgia fans not to make too much of a blowout in your own stadium against a team that's not supposed to be close with you anyway. I think you got to be careful not to make too much of that, because the real statement for Georgia is going to be, can it late in the year handle a stretch of games where it, plenty of people in the media are going to try to tell you that Florida wants to play it close with Georgia. I don't believe that, but some people are going to tell you that. I do expect for Georgia to be in a real tussle with Auburn on the road. That's a venue when Georgia hasn't played well in the past. I think Texas A&M, regardless of what its record is a dangerous opponent, and all that comes in a few-week stretch before the big one, no matter who you're playing, LSU, Alabama, or whoever, in the SEC championship. So Georgia's statement starts when the weather gets cold, but it certainly will be fun to announce to a national media that maybe has been a little too Alabama-Clemson-centric. It'd be certainly fun to send a message to them, but from a Georgia fan standpoint, it's what happens in the other games I think are going to determine more for the Dog.
We sure the weather's ever going to get cold?
Yeah, now the weather may just never get cold, but theoretically speaking. And by the way, the other thing that I said about Notre Dame yesterday, only been a double-digit dog 5 times in Brian Kelly's tenure, and one of those they did win outright. They beat Oklahoma in 2012 as a double-digit underdog. But as I told you yesterday, those 2 previous recruiting classes for Oklahoma going into that game were like a 12th and a 13th. This was an average recruiting program, double-digit favorite over Notre Dame, but nowhere near the kind of talent that Notre Dame's going to see this Saturday. When Notre Dame has seen similar talent, think Alabama in 2012, blowout loss. Think Clemson in last year's college football playoff, blowout loss. Think USC in, 2016, blowout loss. Normally, as Mike Frank said before, Notre Dame's got a global following. It takes a lot for a global followed team to become a double-digit underdog, because a lot of casual fans just assume that they are better than they are. So when that happens, usually something's up. On Saturday, I believe something's up.
Now, I would bring up that in 2015, I believe, that they went down to Clemson, that first Clemson team that played in the national title, and played them to a standstill, lost on a missed 2-point conversion at the end of the game. But, yes, Notre Dame does have a propensity to, sort of lose some of these games, but, they lost by 27 to Clemson a season ago. Alabama lost by 28. And I know you can't necessarily do transitive property all the time, but, I'll be interested to see how this Notre Dame team comes up and plays, especially if the injury report, that if it continues to look as it does right now, Tyson Campbell isn't ready to go. I kind of think that's a sneaky big loss for Georgia, because he played outstanding.
How concerned are you about that based on what you heard yesterday?
I'm not concerned based on what I heard out of Kirby Smart yesterday, but he could have been playing coy there. When I was pulling in Athens yesterday, I saw Campbell in a black walking boot. He was not spotted at practice, and even though, Demetrius Robinson was not there at the start, he eventually came on, and maybe Campbell could have been doing the same thing. I think if we see him at practice today, I think that's a pretty good sign. Yeah. If we don't see him in practice today, I think that's when you really have to start getting worried about him out there.
Yeah.
Because, they're not exactly super deep at that outside cornerback position, and they'll be relying on 2 newcomers in DJ Daniel and Tyreek Stevenson, and Notre Dame has a very good wide receiver in Chase Claypool, and Georgia is not just going to say, hey, Air Stotts, guard him for the whole game. So Claypool is a guy who Notre Dame's going to move around, and I think that he could create some matchup problems if Campbell is not out there ready to go.
You're getting a little bit of an echo. Maybe we can clean that up just a little bit. But good stuff. And as we said off the top of the program, I really believe that how Georgia defends those Notre Dame wide receivers. Give Book one of his options, take that away. If he's facing pressure, he's looking for somebody quick. If he doesn't see it, all of a sudden you've turned a dual threat quarterback into a one-dimensional guy. Now you essentially know that he's looking to run. Stopping Claypool obviously makes a lot of sense. Campbell helps in that regard, because I do think that Campbell's the kind of thing that you just don't see much of in the Midwest. Big guy that can run. That's what Georgia has with its defensive backs, and you just don't see that as much in some of these other places. It's one of the things that makes the truly elite talent teams, they just look different. They look different visually. And Campbell's an example of that. He runs like the wind, and he's got a little size to him. As Cole Kublik said, going into the game against Alabama, Georgia wants to smack these wide receivers to the line of scrimmage. You better believe, I believe, that's a big part of what happens on Saturday. Make it tough for Ian Book's target And all of a sudden, predicting what Book's going to do becomes a lot easier to do. But as Connor said, you need Campbell to feel really good about that. Not that I wouldn't play all day with DJ Daniel, or not that I wouldn't play all day with Tyreek Stevenson. I think I'd probably play with both those guys. But you like 4 more than 3, and Campbell is, of that group, one of the ones that's a little bit more experienced.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a real shame he left the game on Saturday because, and I sort of wrote this yesterday, he was getting his hands on balls for the first time in his Georgia career yesterday, or against Arkansas State on Saturday. In that game, he had more pass deflections in that game alone, and really in the first half, than he did in all of his freshman season at Georgia. And I think that's it was a really positive sign for him. And, you wonder about this foot injury, if he's got a bad wheel, how that might affect him and sort of the way he plays, because he does have he is as good of an athlete as Eric Stokes is. Tyson Campbell is Georgia's best athlete at that cornerback position. You do wonder if he's got a bad wheel, how that might sort of affect him and lead him to maybe overcompensate for other things.
Jimmy Durham asked about how many rushing touchdowns Georgia get on Saturday. I'm going to take Jimmy's question and alter it just a little bit. I listened to Brian Kelly's press conference from yesterday, and he was some of the Georgia running backs, and he obviously correctly said that Georgia's got 5 of these guys that can play seemingly interchangeably. He mentioned a lot of names, didn't mention Zamir White. Now, I am not saying Brian Kelly disrespects Zamir White. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that through 3 games, White has had less of an impact than I probably would have assumed that he would have had. He's found the end zone, I think, twice. But just overall, it's like we're talking about James Cook more than Zamir White. That's something that many of you thought would have happened. I would have said would not have happened. Is this a bigger game for Zamir White on Saturday? Because some people back in the summer would have said, oh, Georgia's going to hold him back and they're going to unleash him on Notre Dame. Is this a bigger game for Zamir White, or is the pecking order that's been established for all of Georgia's playmakers in total, is it kind of is what it is now?
Well, I think you have to like what you've seen from Zamir. I think the difference might be, he's sort of pounded out those 7, 8, 9-yard runs pretty consistently, whereas, James Cook is just, he hasn't had the same workload, but he's just had way more explosive plays. And, I do sort of think, this might be a game where you see Cook, or if you see White get fed a little bit more. I think, he's been around 8, 9 between like 5 and 10 carries in every game he's played so far, and I think that's probably pretty consistent with what Georgia wants to do. And it wouldn't surprise me at all as this game goes on. You do see maybe in the 3rd and 4th quarter, if it's Georgia's got a 2 or 3 touchdown lead and they're getting ready to blow it open, they sort of go a heavy mix of Cook, of White. God, I'm just thinking about James Cook all the time because I have to overcompensate for you sleeping on him.
For my dereliction of duty.
They might in the third and 4th quarter sort of go heavy with Harrion and White to sort of wear down that Notre Dame front, and then the 4th quarter, just kill them with Swift and Cook's speed.
Yeah, I want to be clear about something. I'm not in any way disappointed with what White has done through 3 games. I guess what I'm saying is, and this is probably attributed to how many different Georgia guys have touched the ball, White is not as top of mind through 3 games as I would have expected him to be. And I'm curious if this is just kind of what it is. It's like running back by committee, receiver by committee, like the whole thing is just kind of by committee, or is this really about to change and all of a sudden we're about to see some different guys emerge now that we're almost a month into the season? I'm kind of curious to see that. David Mary also mentions, in addition to Zeus, he also mentioned James Cook as well. And here is one of the things that I think that makes Georgia potentially lethal. If Georgia keeps working the outside with Cook the way that it has, if it continues to utilize the jet sweep with the wide receiver, if you looked at Saturday's game against Arkansas State, they were like one more wide receiver block. I mean, like one more, like really held block from like busting some of these jet sweep things for huge game. It is good game, go home if Georgia starts using the outside like that. It's just ball game. It's over. It is over. Because right now, go back and watch this LSU game. We said this yesterday. I think 3 films that Notre Dame is almost certainly watching is LSU from last year, Missouri and South Carolina from 2017. Undersized defensive lines in the case of Missouri and South Carolina that had success stopping Georgia rushing the football, especially in the first half. Those game films will almost certainly be watched in heavy rotation. But Georgia wasn't as lethal on the outside then as it potentially is now. If you can't stack the situation in between the tackles because you're so worried about the perimeter edge, the deep threat, I don't know what you do.
Right, and, another guy I would just throw in there is Demetrius Robinson, a guy who a season ago we saw have success there on that speed sweep, and Tyler Simmons as well. They were both at practice yesterday. Obviously, they were a little bandaged up. Simmons had a shoulder brace, which he's had shoulder issues before. He had shoulder issue last year that he ultimately played through, but that might be something to watch to see sort of how that lingers and how that might affect his performance. And with Robertson, Kirby had what he called a lower extremity injury, but he had that black kinetic sort of, rehab tape going all the way up and down his left leg when we saw him practice yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Do you think at any point in time, we'll get back to your comments, but do you think at any point in time on Saturday we see Pickens, D-Rob, Blaylock on the field as a trio of receivers
Boy,
at the
I
same
hope
time?
so. That'd be a lot of fun.
Come on now. Jennifer Caldwell-Sperlin is cutting to the chase. Will Stetson Bennett play on Saturday?
Yeah.
I think so too. Jennifer, I think that's a great question, and I think the answer to that question is probably yes.
Is that the Georgia victory cigar, Stetson Bennett playing, or is Kenny McIntosh getting, multiple carries, the Georgia victory cigar?
That's a good question. I think that for a lot of these overmatched teams, like for Arkansas State, I think in the fourth quarter, you'd rather DeAndre Swift play than Kenny McIntosh, because at least maybe there's a chance that one of those guys is tired. Mm-hmm. When you bring in fresh legs McIntosh, who's hungry to prove something, I'm actually really impressed with Kenny. I'm very impressed with Kenny. James Crump also says, I compared the Notre Dame game on Saturday to LSU a year ago, and he says that, hey, Notre Dame doesn't have that same kind of defensive talent. That's true. There's no Braden Fehoko on that Notre Dame defensive line.
They have two very good defensive ends.
But I am confident in saying that LSU
front to back, you are correct. However, this is not a sisters of the poor school. Notre Dame has NFL talent on that defensive line, and their secondary. It might not be the same athletes, but it is a very good secondary as well. It is not a bad secondary that Georgia will see on Saturday.
So I think that going back and looking at some of what South Carolina and Missouri did in 2017 may be more applicable than what LSU did in 2018, because in a weird way, I was thinking about this, and this is going to sound like a weird analogy, but you know how when you played Paul Johnson's Georgia Tech team, the first thing you're supposed to do is take away that fullback. I forget if they called it the A back or the B back. I forget which one they called it, but you had to take away that. Which one was it?
It's the B back.
Yeah, take away that inside run first, and then from there you kind of just started, just chopping off extremities. I feel like with Georgia, it's kind of the same way of, if you're going to let Swift and these guys run between the tackles, then you're going to lose by 100 points. I mean, it's going to be, you have to at least commit taking that away first, and then it's whatever happens in the kind of chess match beyond that that's ultimately going to determine this one way or another. Gary Moran says, is Rudy playing? No, but have y'all heard there's a lot of message board scuttlebutt about this. Have y'all heard this? I've seen this on multiple message boards. That what's his guy's name? Sean Astin.
Sean Astin.
That he's filming.
Samwise Ganji.
Yeah, he's filming a movie in Georgia, like so many people others are. He also played Rudy. They may bring him out as the guest picker on Saturday. I actually kind of hope this happens. I'll tell you.
Oh, he'd be booed mercilessly.
I'm talking about to the point of just throughout the entirety of the segment. In a weird way, that's more entertaining than bringing out some celebrity on Georgia's behalf and have it really kind of be kind of a low energy, kind of a flat segment. I'd love to see the national media try to hype up Rudy, have Georgia fans get their teeth into this thing to get going around 9. Oh, at this point in time, we'll be knocking on the door at noon. I actually would not mind that happening. Get Georgia fans fired up there about 8 hours before a football game. I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all.
So we asked J.R. Reed yesterday if he had seen the movie Rudy. Called it a great movie. I would not go that far.
Yeah,
however, he was asked to say if he thought Rudy was offsides. And he was.
Did somebody really ask him that?
And he was not willing to give a straightforward answer there. However, if they're going to bring in Sean Astin for the Notre Dame game, let's just go full Rudy. Bring in Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau, who are also in Rudy as well and are way bigger, nationally known stars than Mr. Austin
Uh,
than Mr. Rudy Offsides himself.
Jeremy Lloyd says he's been told it's going to be Goldberg as the guest picker. Listen, I think Goldberg would be great at that. Goldberg's doing that Stegmania commercial in the stadium. He's still got it, y'all. He's still got it. Herb Hamilton says blackout College game day. I'd be okay with that. Ray June Johnson says that running game is going to be key. Even if they load the box, we need to bust out 5 to 6 yards and just break their motivation. Load up the box and still can't stop the run. They will slowly give up. Ray, I think you're almost 100% right about that. Let me also use your comment to springboard on something else. Now, I don't want to make more of this than it is because, listen, Georgia's not impervious to mistakes. If Georgia stubs its toe, it could find itself in a closer game on Saturday than we all think. I don't think that happens, but it could. However, it's fair to point out, as much as Ray June says Georgia's ability to run the ball is key here, y'all, the Irish are not running it at all. I'm going to tell you the honest truth. I was doing a little bit of research yesterday on this, yesterday afternoon. Do you know when I looked at Notre Dame's rushing stat, I went to another website to check them again because I thought they must be incorrect. Now, Notre Dame's only played 2 games, so their total rushing stats are going to look a little weird. But they're only averaging like 4-point-something yards a carry after beating New Mexico by 50 points this past week. How does your rushing game not get fat against a team that you beat by 50 points?
It's certainly
that's a sign. Connor, that's not good.
Let me double. Not that I'm doubting your math. Let me double check your math.
Look what they average per rush against Notre Dame. I'm sorry, against New Mexico. They average like 4.6 yards per rush against New Mexico. Check my numbers on that.
So they average 5.5 yards per rush against Louisville and only 4.1.
That's not good
against New Mexico.
Now, unless college football counts stats weird. Sacks count against rushing yards. But unless Book got sacked like 9 times, which would be its own problem.
Yeah.
Connor, they beat New Mexico by 100 points, and they averaged 4.1 yards a rush. That's not good.
Again, I said the stat. We've repeated this stat over and over again. In the last 32 games for Georgia, they're 27-0 when they outrush their opponent, and they're 0-5 when you lose. And I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to stop the run. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to run the ball as much as we all want to see, Fromm throwing the ball around the yard and sacks and picks and whatnot. I think Georgia's going to run this game. They're just going to run the ball, and sort of sit on Notre Dame until they fall over and die.
So when we do our Pella Window post-game show after Georgia wins 41-14, we're going to hear a lot of complaints about how Georgia's going to win a national championship if they don't start throwing the ball better. Like, this is what we're heading for. We're heading for an easy Georgia win with people complaining in the post-game comment section about not throwing the ball more. John William Adams says, 50% over-under, a wrestler is going to be the picker, Nature Boy in contention. So
under.
Here's my thing. My personal Mount Rushmore, Ric Flair is on. Ric Flair is on my personal Mount Rushmore, along with probably Herschel, Darth Vader, and maybe Rocky Balboa. That's like my personal Mount Rushmore. Ric Flair has supported too many teams to be Georgia's
He was in an Auburn
picker.
game last week.
Yeah, Ric Flair is a work for hire at this point in time. And I love the Nature Boy, and I know he's got an authentic connection to Georgia because of his daughter, but I can't have Ric Flair represent Georgia as a guest picker. He's
the Kenny Chesney of wrestlers at this point.
Really, Ric Flair is public domain by this point in time. He's like, the William Tell Overture or something like that. It's like royalty free. You can just use him at your own will. And Kenny Chesney's a pretty good comparison on that. Jimmy Durham says, "Will I wear black to the game on Saturday?" I think I'm gonna have to take a stand and say no. I think I'm gonna have to take a stand and say I'm definitely wearing.
So
red.
you're not in support of a blackout?
I'm not. I can't support the blackout. I'm not generally speaking against blackouts, but this game doesn't need that. This game's gonna be cool enough as it is. Those red LED lights gonna be popping. This game's already got everything that it needs. Now, I think black is an official Georgia color, so I think it's fine if a lot of the folks in the stands want to wear black. I'm not against the idea of wearing black. I am against the idea of sanctioning a blackout. I just don't like. Not for this game. Although
all black everything. I'm going to a funeral on Saturday, and it's not going to be Georgia.
Are you really going to wear black?
Of course, I'm going to wear black. Black's a great looking color.
I mean, listen.
You said it yourself. You think you look best in black.
I do. I've kind of flip-flopped on this. I'm wearing a red shirt today. But in general, I've decided that when I see pictures of myself, I just look better in black. So pretty much any Georgia gear I buy or DawgNation gear I try to get in the years to come, I'm going to try to push for it to be black because I just look better in black. So from that standpoint, I may wear black, but it's not for officially sanctioned blackout reasons. However, if we're all right about this and this is destined to be like an easy Georgia win, what better way to like resurrect the blackout? It's kind of an easy pickings game. Bring back the blackout for the purpose of now like putting it back into rotation. Because I'd be fine if Georgia wore black for every night game. I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine if Georgia wore black for every SEC game. I'd be fine if Georgia just, I'd be fine with everything up to only wearing black at home. I want to see the red stay in rotation. I'd be sort of fine with anything else, but it makes me very nervous that there's a push from what seems to be a group of younger fans. However, not all young fans are in favor of this either. There's plenty of other young fans who don't like this. Is not some things at Georgia seem to be generational divide, old folks versus new folks or young folks. This one does not break along party lines that way. It does not. There are plenty of young people who don't want the blackout either. Gary Westmiller says, "What about black helmets?" It looked good. There's nothing about that. Thomas Van Santa says, "My dogs who think differ from the rest of us who know this UGA team can kick and step aside and let your doubts away. If you're elsewhere, we're here to eat," he says. Sick 'em. I do think that Thomas brings up a pretty good point. That I did get a little pushback yesterday when I was pretty outspoken. On Saturday this started. Some of y'all in the comment section on Saturday thought I was too outspoken. Obviously, my opinion is not going to sway the outcome of the game one way or another, so we're all kind of free to think and say what we want when it comes to something like that. But it is kind of interesting how the closer you get to like a truly plugged-in Georgia fan, the more likely you are to find a UGA fan who's likely to be risk-averse when it comes to comp. Have you noticed this? Would you agree? Casual Georgia fan says Georgia won the national championship the next 12 years. The closer you get to like the inner sanctum of fandom, the more you have someone who was raised on Larry Munson or raised on Vince Dooley, and the opponent's got to be respected at all costs, and everything that could go wrong for Georgia has to be considered. I don't believe Georgia to be a tortured program. I think that there were years in which Georgia was an underachieving program. I think those years are over with, and I am plenty confident going into Saturday.
I think there are a couple examples in this past decade where you could consider Georgia to be a tortured program. But to your larger point, I do agree. The more diehard Georgia fan you talk to, the more they are more risk adverse because they know they've been kicked in the teeth when they thought they were going to get a filet mignon, and they know that they've seen it enough times to know that no matter how great things are going, trouble can always be just around the corner in these big-time football games.
Tony Price says Georgia wins, but the media will still say Georgia's unproven. That's an interesting point. Connor, do you believe that Georgia is the talk of college football Saturday night, Sunday, Monday after this game? Does beating up on Notre Dame kind of propel Georgia in like beyond the way that Clemson and Alabama get talked about, the way that Jalen Hurts has been talked about through 3 games up to this point? Is Georgia the talk of college football throughout the weekend heading into the following week, a week in which they don't play?
Yes and no. I think if this game goes the way both you and I think the way this game is going to go, the absolute bigging talking point is just going to be that Notre Dame just cannot compete with these elite football teams. So in that aspect, Georgia will be getting sort of lumped into that Alabama-Clemson territory. However, I think from a national media perspective, the loudest voices are going to say that Notre Dame is just a complete fraud and can never be trusted to be on the same level as a Georgia, Clemson, Alabama.
Dimitri Sullivan says that a former UGA basketball star, Nick Clax, is going to be signing autographs at the Hyatt Place downtown from 2 to 3 p.m. Dimitri, thanks for dropping that in there. We'll give a little plug for that. Shaman Dog says that the media has already created their narrative, and it's kind of a two-pronged narrative. It's Clemson, Alabama. So, Connor, do you think there's Big 3 talk after that, or is it still Big 2 and, hey, watch out for Georgia?
I think it's still Big 2. And I think it's still Big 2 until Georgia beats Alabama.
And that's probably fair. I mean, listen, yeah. We're still going to adopt that pose around here that you can't you can't prove a ton by beating an opponent we all thought was, at least I thought, was overmatched going into the game.
I will say, though, your LSU over Alabama bandwagon is certainly among the DawgNation employees. Has gotten a bit more crowded. Mike Griffith yesterday told me that he has LSU beating Alabama this year in Tuscaloosa. So got a little more crowd on your bandwagon.
Nice to have him standing on my corner. I'd like to welcome him to my corner that I've been on for months. I was on it before it was cool.
You know, before G. Grace can finish his response and saying, you know, they don't know what they're talking about, I will restore order to the balance here and say, you know, I don't really care how well Joe Burrow is playing, and I do think Joe Burrow has been outstanding this year. I want to put that out there. Alabama is just so in LSU's head that until I see them do it, I just can't trust LSU against Alabama.
I will say this: G. Grace, one of our YouTube commenters, an Alabama fan. G's a good fan. He's not one of these trolls. G's a good fan, and I can almost guarantee I know what G's opinion on this is. I'm sure he thinks that Alabama's still going to win, but I believe he would say, and I bet he'll comment and say this, I believe that he would say the presence of the passing game for LSU makes this the most dangerous version of LSU that Alabama's played up to this point. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that's his opinion. He thinks Alabama will win. They very well might. And he probably respects this LSU team more than any previous team that Saban's done battle with because of how much more advanced this passing game is. By the way, somebody, and we're going to get off the air in a minute. We've kind of drifted back in the lane of going long on these. Somebody brought this up on YouTube, and I want to mention this. It's not UGA related, but it's worth bringing up. I can't find the comment to give the commenter credit. I'm sorry. What is wrong with Emory Jones? If you're Emory Jones, how are you going to watch a guy that didn't start in high school start over?
That was very interesting to me, how they went to Kyle Trask first.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything's necessarily wrong with him, but I was like, all right, cool. So this is like the start of the Emory Jones era. And I thought it'd be a little interesting. And they trot Kyle Trask out there. I'm like, what's going on here? I was told, by Florida fans all offseason that Emory Jones, is going to be a guy to be reckoned with in a few years. And to Trask's credit, came in and played well. Now, I don't know how much you want to credit Kyle Trask for a kicker whose name is Chance Poor, missing a 39-yard field goal with a minute left to go in that game. But, that Florida-Tennessee line, I have just no idea what to make of it. I could easily see, Tennessee being the team we thought Tennessee was in weeks 1 and 2, where they gave away 2 games that, in all honesty, they played those games 10 times. They should probably win both of them 6 or 7 times. But, you just don't know what Florida's going to look like with Trask out there at quarterback.
I am more confident than ever that all the stuff I said all offseason long is true. Florida is not good.
Oh, I thought you were about to say something positive about Tennessee.
No. I'm more confident. No, listen, I am more confident than ever that Florida is not good and destined for a miserable, miserable season. Celebrating these razor-thin wins over averages, grits, Kentucky, below average Miami. It's a bad, bad look. Am I also correct in saying that Florida fans have been calling for Kyle Trask since Luke Del Rio was on campus? Weren't there Florida fans who wanted Trask to play ahead of Del Rio, or does it just seem like he's been there that long?
It sounds about right.
Boy, he's been there for a long time. Something tells me that Georgia may one day face Emory Jones wearing a Georgia Tech uniform. I don't know why. For some reason, this just seems like it might happen. It feels like one of those, last stop situations. Anyway, all right, a couple more comments. We'll get out of here. A lot of folks seemingly agreeing that Florida's a joke, including Daniel Aldrich. So the Tyson Campbell thing, that's going to be a pretty big deal. Somebody asking, a couple people have asked this. Scott G as well on YouTube. So do we think that game day is going to be at Myers Quad? Is that where it's going to be? Have they announced yet?
I don't believe they have announced. So in years past when they've come, they've done it outside of Myers Quad. That's where it was in 2000.
Which will impact a lot of people's tailgates, by the way.
So my follow-up is that I believe a year ago when SEC Nation came, they did it outside the Russell Special Collections Library, which is sort of on the other.
That's a smaller space, though, right?
It might not be.
Okay.
At least from where they sort of set up, and that is closer to the stadium and has a better sort of viewpoint of the stadium.
Yeah, because the Myers Quad, while it's a great tailgate spot, in terms of like the atmosphere of like being like it's not that close to the stadium, really. I'm saying
Correct. And I do think with the amount of people who are going to be there tailgating and trying to get to Myers Quad super early, they may want to maybe keep that space open because I don't know how much you want the game day crowd sort of mingling with all those serious hardcore tailgaters.
Yeah, that's true. Dan Riggin says, is it from an inside perspective that I think that game day doesn't like coming to Georgia? It's just my opinion. It's just my personal opinion, but part of the reason why I believe that is what Connor and I were just talking about. There's no really good place to have it. I'm old enough to remember when game day came to Athens for the first time in 1998. They built this like tower overlooking the Tate Center parking lot because they wanted to have some view of the stadium. Athens is just such a landlocked place, and you've got so much stuff in this tight little tiny area. It's just kind of hard to have that really cool view that they want to have. Not that the campus is beautiful, but in terms of like identifying at a football game, I think it's just a little bit hard for them to be able to set up and do all the stuff that they really want to do. But that's just my opinion. I don't have any inside information on that at all. We're going to try to have somebody from Game Day on the show this week, but we're currently efforting that at the time. Matt Godwin says, why don't they use the parking lot by the bookstore? He means the Tate Center parking lot. I just think that's just...
There's too much already going on.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on there. Because that for those of you who haven't seen Game Day in person in a while, that Game Day set is huge now. It's huge. Brad Hotton says, build another tower. It did look cool, although Georgia went out and played like a dud that day against Ray Brandon says, first day that DawgNation has had audio from me in like 2 weeks. So, Ray, here's the thing. I'm assuming you mean on Facebook. There is a Facebook audio issue. We have investigated this. We've looked at it. It's Facebook only, and it's coming from their side of things. If it persists to be a problem, and I apologize for that, I would invite you to check out DawgNation Daily on YouTube and all of DawgNation's video content on YouTube. I'm guessing it'll work better for you over there. This has just been a really weird issue with Facebook. They do a lot of things well. Distributing content, for instance, is something they do really well. Letting folks know when we're going live is obviously a huge help, but their overall video platform is just not quite as advanced as YouTube's is. So YouTube or Twitter, you may have more success with that. I apologize for your problem. We've had a lot of internal meetings about this. It doesn't affect everybody, and it doesn't affect people on the same day, and it doesn't affect people even for the entirety of a show. But it does go out from time to time, and that seems to be a Facebook deal there on that. So thanks for checking in, Ray, when you can. I appreciate that. John William Adams says, what about game day in a hot air balloon over Athens or in a parade float? I'd be there for all of that. I'll be there for all of that. Reed Paddock also says, how about live? He says Facebook freezes, YouTube does not. Yeah, that's probably true. That's probably true. Billy Hurley says that Nick Saban must be a Facebook stockholder trying to silence us. I wouldn't put it past him. I would not put it past him at all. All right, let's get ready to get out of here. As we get ready to wrap up today's program, let me also invite you to check out, we do AJC Falcons News Now every Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. on the AJC Atlanta Falcons News Now Facebook page. Myself, the former Falcon Chuck Smith, we're having a really good time doing that program, and I appreciate those of you who've checked us out on that. Also, just check out AJC.com throughout the day for your Atlanta news now. Stay up to date on kind of everything going on, no matter what it might be, Falcons related, Braves coming up in the playoffs, also other news events taking place, a lot of stuff happening in the world right now, some scary stuff maybe even. Sometimes we don't obviously like hearing about that, but it's important to stay in the know, whether it become international conflicts, things like that. Well, you can keep up to date with all of it at AJC.com. Get your Atlanta news now at AJC.com. We'll be back here tomorrow. Before we go, let me also say thanks to Dari and the whole team at R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews shows up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. One of the things we like most about them. You'll like them as well. Check them out online at rsandrews.com. They'll ask, how can they make you smile today? And story after story, that's indeed what R.S. Andrews has been doing. Y'all have a great day. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Deemer Box. We'll look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow.